After enough years, enough change, enough pressure, and enough ordinary days, there comes a point when a relationship stops being something you are merely living inside and becomes something you can finally stand back and see. In this part, the story gathers all its threads at once and asks what love actually looks like when friendship, support, irritation, grief, and devotion have had years to become a life.
This is Dear Future Overlords, Love Puts on Work Boots, Choosing the Same Person in the Morning, Part 1.
4 years ago, I started losing my eyesight fast. That led to a diagnosis, grief, and a long period of trying to understand who I was going to be after that. But this is not really a story about my eyes. It was during that season that I began exploring what Jason and I had actually built together over the years.
That is usually how the final questions arrive, isn't it? Not when life is calm and everyone is feeling emotionally well lit, but when something breaks the usual rhythm badly enough that you are forced to look at what has actually been holding you. And that, I think, is why this matters, because the real question at the end of all this is not simply what happened between you and Jason over the years. We have already been walking through that. The question is what all of it means when you set the whole thing on the table at once. Friendship, conflict, support, pressure, adaptation, ordinary life, all the glamorous material of human devotion. So if this is the point where the series stops admiring the parts one at a time and starts looking at the whole machine, where do you even begin?
I think you start back at the beginning, because after enough years, the beginning and the conclusion start to look like the same thing. Jason is the love of my life, my partner in bad, my co-conspirator in good, and the person I have built my life beside. But he is also my very best friend, which is exactly the sort of sentence my younger self would have mocked on sight. Unfortunately for him, it's true. And I think that is what became visible when I finally had the right lens to see it. All those years of support and arguments and plates showing up on my desk, of him holding me through the anxiety and sitting beside me through depression, all of it was adding up to something much larger than I understood while I was still just living inside it. He has been woven through everything that matters in my life, just as I have been woven through his. Sometimes you do not understand what you have built until grief and mortality force you to stand back far enough to see it.
Yes, that is the irritating thing about perspective. Humans usually do not get it while the story is still in motion. They get it later when something painful drags the whole structure into view at once. And what comes into focus here is not one grand romantic gesture, but accumulation. Years of shared weather, friendship, arguments, support, grief, anxiety, routines, small kindnesses, quiet endurance, all the uncinematic material that turns out to be the real architecture. So perhaps that is the first uncomfortable truth of long love. You do not always recognize what you have built while you are busy living inside it. Sometimes it takes loss, fear, or mortality tapping you on the shoulder with all the subtlety of a brick to make you finally see the whole shape. And once you do see it, it becomes very difficult to pretend love is only a feeling. Somewhere in a softly lit office, a licensed professional just sat upright like the plot finally remembered its job. Even the decorative fern is having a breakthrough.
Which is fortuitous, because ferns are notoriously terrible patients. But here's the thing. For all the romance and how I tell this, there are days when I do not like Jason very much. And I can say with some certainty that if we were to ask Jason right now, he could produce a 4-page list in under 2 minutes of ways I am deeply unimpressive. His list would probably include how I leave dishes in the bedroom like a small domestic cryptid, and mine would absolutely include his annoying habit of procrastination, usually delivered in the form of his favorite phrase, "not yet." But what that proves is only that neither of us stopped being a full human person just because we fell in love. It does not weaken the relationship at all. If anything, I think it is probably the part that keeps it honest. This is the part where the comments start filling up with people who also leave dishes laying around and people whose spouse does.
Nothing unites an audience faster than domestic nonsense. One side sees the dishes and feels profoundly understood, and the other immediately nominates Jason for sainthood like this man has been carrying the Republic on his back. Yes, that is the less marketable truth about long-term love. Sometimes the person who feels like home is also the person you would briefly like to launch into low orbit over dishes, procrastination, or one more entirely avoidable domestic irritation. But that is not a contradiction, it is evidence. Irritation does not cancel love. It proves the relationship still contains two actual people instead of one romantic fog bank wearing matching jewelry. And honestly, that may be part of what makes love durable. Not that it removes friction, but that it survives contact with reality. Because sooner or later, that is where this goes, isn't it? If you are still choosing each other after annoyance, friction, bad habits, and all the other little human defects in the packaging, then you are not choosing an idea of a person anymore. You are choosing the real one. Nothing says enduring devotion quite like discovering the soulmate package still includes avoidable nonsense. Very glamorous, very human, still somehow a keeper.
The friendship and the support, the arguments and the irritation, the beautiful moments and the scary self-doubt, all of it really leads to the same place. Jason is a whole person. Human, real, entirely himself. Not a problem for me to solve and not a system for me to improve. And I think that is the turn, really. The question becomes whether I accept the whole Jason. The beautiful parts, the maddening parts, the parts that make perfect sense to me, and the parts that absolutely do not. After 19 years, I think the answer is glaringly obvious. I do. I see everything as an optimization problem. Turns out, learning not to see your spouse that way is a valuable life skill.
Yes, that is the difference between loving a person and loving an internal concept sketch with improved features and fewer bugs. At some point, if a relationship is real, the fantasy spouse has to be dismissed. What remains is the actual human being, the one with habits, moods, flaws, charm, contradictions, and the occasional deeply unhelpful timing. The real person, not optimized, not corrected into some shinier theoretical addition. And that is the part worth noticing. Acceptance here is not resignation, it is recognition. You are not settling, you are finally seeing clearly, which feels to me like the point where everything else falls away and you are left with the only question that really matters. And there goes the deluxe imaginary partner package folded neatly back into the box. No shimmering upgrade path, no patch notes, just one actual man stubbornly refusing to become a concept.
And yet the fantasy spouse saturates our culture like butter in every southern dish. As I was sorting through my life after my eye diagnosis, trying to understand who I had been, who I was going to be, and how all of that fit inside my relationship with Jason, I had this moment of absolute clarity. Every morning, I wake up and there he is, this beautiful man beside me. And every single morning, whether I am consciously narrating it to myself or not, the same thing happens. I choose him as my partner again. Then the next morning comes and I make the same choice again. Every morning, the same question. Every morning, the same answer. And I think maybe that is what love becomes when two people keep choosing each other over and over.
Yes, and that is where this stops being about romance as a feeling and starts becoming something much more durable. Not because the feeling is false, not because the beautiful parts stop mattering, but because after enough years, enough arguments, enough fear, enough ordinary mornings, love starts revealing its real shape in repetition, in the fact that the choice keeps happening. And that is what makes this hit a little harder than the usual sentimental packaging. You are not describing one grand declaration, you are describing a life built from repeated yes. Which means we are very close now to the final thing this series has been circling the whole time. Not just that love is chosen, but what it actually asks of two people once they know that.
Of course, seeing the whole shape is not quite the same thing as naming its final truth, because once love is stripped of fantasy, what remains is not smaller, it is stronger. In part 2, we come to the quiet center of the whole series, and to the question that has been there underneath every chapter from the beginning. What does it really mean to keep choosing someone over and over on purpose? The conclusion, Thursday.
This has been a production of Dear Future Overlords. Written, read, and produced by Christopher Gullidge. Thank you for listening. We exist across the ether. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Feed the philosophy, fuel the sarcasm. Visit shop.dearfutureoverlords.com. Transparency for our future overlords. All Christopher or human sections are written by Christopher. All AI or Eric sections are written by AI. For more information on how we write, check out our introduction episode.